Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. First of all, for the ones that don't know me, my name is Matteo. I'm CTO at Orbitant. We are a software consultancy company that is specialized, let's say, in bridging the gap between business problems and engineering solutions that should solve them with a sprinkle of innovation. What does it mean? It means that we are not just executors, basically, and we position ourselves as problem solvers that use engineering and right now AI, because that's basically innovation right now, as you may know. And actually, we're going to talk about this today as well. And at the core of what we do, there is always, this mantra of getting better and grow together by sharing knowledge. And once every month, we hold one of our weekly knowledge sharing sessions in the open. Today, our speaker is Graham Roberts. He's an old, let's say, a mix of a friend, client, now most probably a colleague as well. And basically, Graham is a fractional CTO that has over 20 years of experience, mostly in UK. And today he's going to talk about what you can see in the screen, basically. What happens when a company decides not to leverage, proper tech, and basically is gonna go over extinction. So Graham, the stage is yours. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, if you wanna, go for a round of introduction, that's up to you. I'm gonna just shut up.
Brilliant. Thank you for thanks for the intro, Matteo. And I'm still getting over seeing all of these familiar faces. So for anyone who doesn't know, the reason for that is I've had the pleasure of working with several of these guys previously, who were definitely on that list of people who I would love to work with again. So it's really nice to see some of those familiar faces. And for anyone who I haven't worked with previously, it's nice to see you today as well. And thanks for tuning in to this session. So by way of intro, as Matteo said, my name is Graham Roberts. I'm the founder of Full Stack Consulting. I'm a fractional CTO. And basically what that means, if we strip the names away, I help small businesses who have underinvested in technology avoid what I call an extinction event. That's why I call them dinosaurs. I try to help them modernize so that they don't become extinct. That's what I do for these businesses. As part of that, really what I'm trying to do is help them turn tech into an asset for their business, whereas often it's either absent or it's a liability. They're the types of business that I work with. It was a little while ago that Jose asked if I'd like to come along and do this talk today, and I was keen to do it because I think what you guys are doing over at Orbitant is special. I know that you've got a great team there, so I was keen to take part. The audience is slightly different to my usual audience because usually I'm speaking with owners of those dinosaur businesses that I described a moment ago, but it's a bit more of a mixed audience today. So I'm going to do things slightly differently. I've borrowed some aspects from my normal talk because I think hopefully they'll be useful for you guys to tune into. But I've split it really into three parts, which is talking about those dinosaurs and how it relates to you guys, hopefully. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own business and what I think AI means for it and how I'm going to have to involve. And then the third part is my take on how I see AI impacting the role of software engineering. And one of the things I would say is treat it as that. It is my view out of one of many. Everyone's got a different take at this point in time. And I think the main thing is to be kind of curious and asking the questions right now. So it's by no means a definitive position, but it is my one. So that's kind of me. That's the talk. If you guys have any questions, then I'm happy to take them whenever, however. So I don't know if we've got chat or shout out, raise a hand, however you guys want to do it. As long as I see it, I'll take questions at any time. So fire away as you would like to. But to begin with, let's get into it. Oh, one of the things that I should say is I've spent a lot of years being technical and a lot of years being rubbish at designing things and putting slides together. So you'll have to excuse the stylistic side of things. It's not my forte. But anyhow, that aside, first things first, I mentioned that I work with dinosaur businesses, specifically sub £10 million dinosaur businesses. So what does that mean? So these dinosaurs, they've been around for a long time. They're successful businesses. They've been established maybe 10, 15, 20 years or more. But they remain quite manual and underinvested in technology. And that position, especially in the current climate, that leaves them a little bit fragile and at risk of extinction in this modern environment. Like you guys, you're going to be seeing the pace of change at the moment and what is possible. And it's never really been more dangerous to stand still as a business and not adopt some of these new technologies and new ways of working, because you lose ground really fast. So that's what the dinosaur is. Now, any of you guys who see any of my stuff on LinkedIn, well, firstly, apologies if it's not your cup of tea. But secondly, you may have seen from time to time I talk about something called a dinosaur discount. So I just wanted to explain what that is, and also why the software engineers amongst you, software engineers, software architects, etc., you've got quite a big role to play for businesses in this dinosaur discount. So first of all, what is it? So this chart, hang on, I've got to move some windows around so I can see what's going on here. So with this chart, there's a few little lines on here, and what they mean, down the bottom, you'll see there's a couple of low solid lines down the bottom, black and orange solid lines. Now, the black one, just assume that is a company's profitability, some measure of profitability. The orange line is showing that a company could be more profitable if they'd made sensible investments in technology. Okay, that's it. Nothing more to it than that. Now, most companies or owners of companies, they're interested in the valuation of that business. And simplistically, a business is often valued at some sort of multiple of its profitability. It's a simplification, but broadly that's true. What the dotted lines are trying to show you is that a manual dinosaur business will be valued with a smaller multiple than a tech-enabled, efficient, scalable business. It's partly down to risk, it's partly down to opportunity. But what that means is those dinosaur businesses, let's say someone's been building a business for 20 years. Great business, they've given people jobs the whole time, they've done great work, everyone's happy with it. But it's really manual and to a degree fragile. Like the processes require lots of people doing complex things. There's a lot of knowledge stuck in people's head. Contrast that with someone who has codified their systems and processes and automated them and uses digital delivery to make things efficient and on demand. They're just going to get valued differently. A tech-enabled one, it will be valued with a higher multiplier in comparison with the dinosaur. And the chart is showing that gap, the gap between valuations. And that can be really quite significant. You can actually take two businesses which on the face of it look quite similar, and they could look quite similar in terms of size, potentially quite similar in terms of profitability, but they just get valued differently because of their characteristics. So that's what the dinosaur business is and what the dinosaur discount is. Now, let's take a closer look at what these dinosaurs look like. They tend to have a lot of legacy friction. So getting things done is just difficult. Part of the reason for that is they have a lot of manual processes and often inefficient processes. They're likely to have, if they've got technology, they're likely to have quite a lot of technical debt that accompanies that technology. And those of you that have gone deep in code bases, you'll know that the more tech debt you've got, the slower you end up moving. You end up wading through treacle It just slows you down. Typically, they will have tons of spreadsheets everywhere, often quite complicated, often used by multiple users at the same time to manage workflows. Frequently, they will have systems that people are just afraid to touch, too afraid to touch. That could be like enterprise systems that were bought off the shelf and got customized and customized and customized over the years to the point that now no one knows what will happen if you press a particular button. Or it could be a bespoke piece of software that has got, I don't know, maybe it just became stale, out of date, or maybe it's just layers of complexity that aren't documented, etc., etc. Could be any of those things. But it gets to a point where that tech is so complex that the business, they can't innovate. So that's what these dinosaurs tend to look like. And that's why if someone was going to buy one of these dinosaurs, they would apply that discount to the valuation, because it's just going to be, carrying more risk fundamentally to keep it running. Now, we're at a little bit of an inflection point, because you can take one of those dinosaur businesses and they might wake up to the fact that they need to modernize and adopt some modern technology, which would be a good thing. But one of the things that I've observed is that right now, in the last couple of years, let's say, it's really easy for a company to think, right, yeah, I need to do something with technology, but end up building something that would have been great maybe just 3 years ago. But because they're doing it today and things have moved on quite a bit in the last couple of years, they end up creating something which really doesn't move them forwards. Because relatively speaking, compared to the tech that's available now, like they've built something for an old world and not a new world. And that's quite tricky. If you think about these companies, they're not used to working with technology. And the tech that's now available is quite a big step change for them. And it's not always straightforward for them to make that step. So, yeah, the key thing at the moment is, rather than these types of businesses deciding to invest in tech, but making an investment that doesn't really get them ahead of their competitors, the key for people like me and for people like you guys at Orbiton is to look for opportunities to use modern technology that allows them to almost slingshot past their competitors that are being slower to pick up on these new tech. And the risk at the moment is actually that if they decide to make an investment, but in the wrong tech, they end up not actually moving themselves forwards fast enough. So this is the first bit where I just want to flag something to you guys, that with tech, there's like an infinite range of different things that could potentially be built. And I think one of the tasks for us who are in this kind of tech game at the moment is to make sure we're being selective and make sure we're picking technologies that are going to set projects up for the years to come based on these new technologies that are emerging right now. So that's the first thing that I wanted to call out. So sticking with these businesses for the time being, I'm going to talk about layers of AI adoption. Now, I spotted a statistic that was out of the UK a couple of weeks ago from the Chambers of Commerce, so the people who speak with lots of businesses over in the UK. And their stat was that the AI usage or AI adoption in the UK was running at 54% of small and medium-sized businesses this year versus 35% last year. Now that sounds quite impressive, but when I first heard that stat, I thought, well, that doesn't really tell the whole story, which is why I put together this little staircase diagram, which, as I mentioned earlier on, is not visually the most appealing diagram you're ever going to see, but it does do quite a good job of illustrating the journey that a lot of companies go on. So at level 1, that's basically the chat phase. It's the entry route for non-tech people to start using AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is. You've just got these, let's say, simplistic chat tools. Now, there's not there's value to be gained there, but it's not a differentiator because everyone can use them. Everyone can use the same prompt. You can even use a chat tool to create the prompt so that you can get more value from it, but it's a starting point. So that's where most people start. Then we get a progression to level 2, which on here I've marked it as the brain. It's basically simple chat plus context. So by context there, we're talking about, like for you guys, it might be a code base. It could be on a more of an operational side of things. It could be a policy document, a set of brand guidelines, whatever it is. But the point being, you're not just using, say, chat in an ad hoc way. You're providing it with some context so that the results you're going to get back from it are more reliable, more consistent, more in keeping with your brand voice, your company guidelines, etc. Level 3, I've marked it as the gateway because, well, levels 1 and 2, the chat and the brain, they're really assistants. You ask it for something, it generates it, it gives it back to you. Level 3, where we get to like the filter level, the gateway, is where that's where most people start to see a shift from just an assistant to using AI that can make decisions and actually act on something. So I've called it a filter here because some of the common like use cases might be things such as like routing an inquiry to an appropriate team or grading a document based on its compliance with a policy, for example. They're low risk, they're not customer facing. It's like entry level way to getting into AI that makes decisions. Beyond that, I've gone to workflows. And by that, I mean, rather than just having a single thing that makes a decision, it's incorporating that into steps so that you can execute workflows, automate processes rather than individual decision points. And then level 5, I put as proprietary asset. So rather than just relying on like prompts and context and off-the-shelf AI tools, you might actually be building some proprietary capability that goes beyond that in order to create potentially like fully autonomous parts of the business, for example. So that's a fairly kind of standardized journey. But the reality is, most businesses, especially those dinosaur businesses that I'm talking about, they're not past step 2. That's where they're sat at. And the reasons they're sat there, there's a couple of biggies to call out. The obvious one is that they don't know how to progress to step 3. But actually, I'm finding that a lot of them do have an idea for how they want to progress to step 3, but they just don't trust the technology enough yet to make that step. Maybe they don't understand it enough to recognize what will happen to their data, how secure it will be, where it's going to go, what it means from a privacy perspective. So I think at the moment you've got a lot of people wanting to make that step, but there's a barrier, there's something blocking them, and it's not necessarily the idea. Right. So that's a little bit on the types of businesses that I tend to work with, the kind of journey that they go on, and where they are at in terms of their kind of AI adoption right now. And probably the final thing to say on these types of businesses to link it to what you guys are doing is you've got to figure out a way of bringing these people on the journey with you. Like often you guys are going to look at someone's business and how it operates and what opportunities there might be. And you might spot a fantastic opportunity, but you've got to understand that there could be several barriers that need to be overcome in order for that to actually materialize. It's not just the availability of technology. It's not just the availability of the expertise to do it. You've got all of these other factors as well. And that big one being trust that it's actually going to be safe to use. The other, actually, which is quite an interesting one, if you haven't come across this already, I think you certainly will do. People by default will tend to hold AI, not just AI actually, but systems in general, but in particular AI, they'll often hold it to a higher level than they would hold a human equivalent to. And that can become a barrier. Often they'll think, well, it's not perfect. It's going to be error prone, so we can't use it. Even if it potentially would be an improvement on what they already have. So yeah, in conclusion, just keep that in mind. Like there's loads of opportunities out there right now, but the barrier isn't just capability to do something. It's often a more kind of fundamental fear of doing something. Okay, so where I'm going to go next is slightly different view of things. I've applied some of this thinking to my small business. So as we said earlier on, I operate as a fractional CTO, and really the main thing that I do, as I said earlier on, is I help those dinosaur businesses that don't have a technical capability. I help them modernize. I help them figure out what tech they ought to have, and then I help them invest in it and incorporate it into their businesses. Now, that's fine. I really enjoy doing that. But there is a bit of a reality which has started to emerge, and I've seen this myself, in that these days, some people, they'd rather create a CTO in, say, a Claude project or a Gemini gem than hire a fractional CTO. That's just the reality. Like, I don't blame them for that. I've got a chief marketing officer gem in my Gemini setup. Works really well. I've even got assistant CTO gems that I use. They enable me to be more productive. So I think it's a smart move to rely on these things, but for sure it impacts on how I need to operate. Before I get into how I'm going to change in response to that, though, there's something else that I wanted to call out, which is that I was going to say there's an abundance of information available now. There's almost an infinite amount of information that is available right now. I'll be really interested to see if any of you guys have encountered this. You could come up with a fantastic plan, architecture, whatever we want to call it. And that would always have been scrutinized. But now it can be scrutinized by more people in more ways because they can interrogate it and ask it questions with their AI assistant, with their AI CTO. And at a certain level, that can be great. It can be really helpful and it can help improve the end result. But it can also create never-ending feedback loops, which mean progress never gets made. Because you can have created something that's great, and an AI, if you ask it to critique something, look for gaps, give an opinion on it, it will always do that. It can do it once, then you can ask it to do it again, and it will do it again. You can ask it again, it will do it again. And when you take, or when you provide this kind of information or this tool to a non-technical business owner, it can create a problem because there's never a point at which they can feel that they've got enough information because they're reliant on an AI and its job is to produce this information. It's not such a good decision maker. And even if you did ask it for a decision, you'd then have a problem because it's difficult to trust in its decision because it's AI, it's not a person, it's not accountable for anything. So that's something I'd be interested to hear later on whether you guys have encountered that, whereby you can see that actually you thought you were in conversation with a person, but actually you're not. You're in conversation with the AI that that person is using, and you need to develop the capability to say, all right, okay, we've been around this loop. We could keep going around it, but enough is enough. Actually, now's the time to progress. We've analysed this as much as is sensible. But that caveat aside, broadly, I think these tools are great. I think they add an awful lot of value. Now, why have I drawn this graph? Let me come to the graph. So it's because my view is that the power of AI means that traditional consulting firms, people working in the knowledge economy, are going to find the value of their core proposition trending towards zero. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking about myself there. Okay, so as a consultant, people who provide information for other companies to act on, my view is that if that is all we do, and that's what we continue to do, the value of that core service trends to zero, because you could just go to Gemini. So, right, give me a technical specification for X, Y, Z. Tell me whether I should invest in whatever it is. Obviously, that's an oversimplification. But that's the risk in consulting, not just in tech, but in other places as well. So the way I look at that is there's a new set of tools which will make the value of my core proposition trend towards zero. I can either accept that, pack my bags, or go do something completely different, or I can say, well, that's a rather remarkable opportunity. If that technology can replace so much of what I'm doing, that's going to free up an awful lot of my time to spend doing stuff which is layered on top of that information. And so that's what the graph is trying to show. Like that red line, imagine that's a proxy for my historic core service offering. So that's going to get less valuable. But the time that that frees up, that allows me to do the stuff on the blue line. So AI is going to free me up. It's going to, first of all, it's going to allow me to create like proprietary context, and I'll come on to this in a moment, which I'll be able to feed to my proprietary team of agents. It's going to allow me to focus more of my time on pushing for actual business outcomes, which will mean working more with humans. Any of you guys on the delivery side of things, you'll know how important it is to have good relations with internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, look for where people's fear might be holding them back from contributing to things, whatever it might be. There's a massive human aspect to delivering good outcomes, get freed up for that. Also allows me to focus more time on the accountability side of things. So more time spent preparing, let's say, a board of directors for an upcoming investment decision, and then giving them the assurance that we're accountable for the results of that decision, so that they're confident in terms of pulling the trigger versus the alternative, which is where something gets put in front of them and they're not really confident that there's someone who can deliver the outcomes that they need to drive a return on the investment that they're going to make. So that's the idea behind this graph. The old value prop is getting replaced by AI, and the challenge for people like me and in other industries as well is to leverage that technology so that we can reinvent the offer and now present something to the market which is maybe 2x, 5x, 10x as valuable as what the previous proposition was. Okay, so that's definitely going to have a role in consulting, not just tech consulting, but across the board. And I think it's a good exercise for every business owner, everyone working in the knowledge economy and beyond, just to go through that kind of thought experiment. Like, what's AI going to change in my sector? What's it going to do to the value of what I was previously selling? But how can I use that to my advantage to offer something more valuable? Okay, so this is where we start coming to sort of leverage. So we need to figure out how to embrace these tools, use them to our advantage. And to give you an idea of what that's going to mean for me, some of the most time-intensive aspects of my job are like producing documentation to get funding for a tech investment, or producing the documentation to communicate to partners what it is we want them to create. So, for example, that'd be me talking with you guys. It could be making architectural decisions that are compatible with our tech stack and with short-term objectives and with long-term objectives. So there's a lot of research and a lot of documentation in my role. I can massively speed up all of those areas by handing off tasks to an agentic team. So with that agentic team, I'm not just talking about prompts and context. I'm talking about building a private, proprietary AI-driven system where I would have an orchestration layer, which would enable me to deliver inputs to my agents autonomously. So what I mean there is, as I'm receiving emails or meeting transcripts or documents, rather than me having to read all of those things, they flow straight through to my agentic team so that they can take actions without me asking them to do it. Like there'd be certain labeling that goes on that would drive that, but they work in the background without me having to get involved with everything. That team of agents would have several different players in it. I'd have probably an architect who'd be responsible for applying my playbook, coming up with a plan. I'd have an enforcer whose job is to make sure that that architect complies with various rules that we set. I'd have an interviewer who'd be responsible for saying, well, actually, we need to get Graham's view on something here. Maybe we've reached a stalemate, or we just need to make a decision somewhere. Key bit would be a learner. There'd be an agent whose job is to look at wherever new information had been pushed into the system, which we should remember so that we can reuse it later on. And then I'd have some sort of publisher who's responsible for artifact creation, producing documents, which would then be sent to me for review. So there, in that setup, I'd be using my team to massively speed up how I can create the work, which would ultimately get delivered to clients. Key bit though, it all would flow through me. So the agents are not replacing me; they're just doing a lot of the manual work that I currently do. Okay, why would I do that? Because in doing so, I will be able to spend less time researching, reading documentation, checking dependencies and compatibilities, spend less time drafting specs and documentation, and spend more time focused on delivery, focused on the human factors that are vital to success. I'd spend more time driving the modernization agenda, like enabling decisions to be made by being accountable for results. So that's what I'm intending to do internally to get my business ready for the next phase, if you like. What I intend to do, if I can figure that out, if I can get all of that system working, then that gives me a massive amount of leverage. My view is that if I can figure that out and create that amount of leverage for me, it doesn't make any sense to keep that leverage private to me. It's only rational to then try and copy that so that other people can apply the same amount of leverage. Because if you figured out how to use leverage, you want to multiply it, use it as many times as possible. And that's a concept that I'm going to come back to in a moment. So hang on to that idea of leverage. Okay, and then just rounding this slide off, and coming back to the title of the talk, which was something to do with choosing scale over extinction. For me, this is about saying, consulting is getting absolutely ripped up by AI. There is no two ways about it. That's what's happening. But I don't think it's something that's going to die. I think it's something that just needs to be fundamentally different. And this is my take at looking at how I'm going to operate differently. So I'm going to be more focused on outcome and less in the weeds, just managing information. Okay. Right. Next slide. Now I want to start talking a little bit more about you guys, or why I say you guys, I mean like the software developers who are in the room. So this graph is something that I nicked this graph from one of my other webinar presentations. So let me explain what it means. Most companies exist to make money. And a lot of business owners are interested in their company valuation very rationally. And that could be for a few reasons. Two of the most obvious would be that one day they might like to exit the business and the valuation will impact what they get out of it. Another could just be that a business that is worth more, it's easier for it to raise funds to invest to grow, for example. So it's very rational that a business will be interested in its valuation. Bottom line is, though, it's only worth what the market would value it at. What this chart is trying to show you is the impact of technology decisions on a company valuation. Now, when a business just starts out, it doesn't really have much technology because it's small, it doesn't have many processes, it's quite manual. Then over time, let's say they acquire a few more systems, but they tend to be siloed. They're all independent. At some point, those systems, they become integrated and we get into a little bit of a sweet spot. We've got integrated systems and scalable processes. Like at that point, let's say the tech is delivering max value to the company. Sometimes though, we go a little bit beyond that. Sometimes we then end up with multiple systems. The integrations might be a little bit brittle or complicated. The technology itself, it could become brittle and complicated, and we start to introduce risk. If we go too far, we spoke about tech debt earlier on and how that can accumulate. That can make the tech stack for a business unmaintainable, potentially insecure. And you can see from the chart the impact that some of these things have on a company valuation. When there's no integrated scalable systems, hinder scale up, not great for valuation. When we go too far the other way, we're introducing an awful lot of risk into the business, and an investor would value it worth less because they would perceive that they will have to do something to fix that risk and to manage it. So that's what this chart is trying to convey. Like the tech decisions that a company make, they have an impact not just on the day-to-day, but on the overall valuation of a company. So there's a couple of bits that I think it will be useful for you guys to focus on here, which is that like low quality, unmaintainable code is a liability. It's the sort of thing that will come up in something called tech due diligence. If a company's getting valued, you go through due diligence, and if you find this mess of technology, it's a bad thing for the valuation. It's pretty straightforward to make that point, I think. But the reason I call it out is because there's a danger. There's a danger at the moment with AI. Now, bear in mind, I'm a big fan of AI. I advocate for it in many different places, but we can't be blind to this danger. Let's just say you guys, but you know what? Everyone now we're just going to code everything with AI without any oversight. We're just going to let things run wild. But for a while, you might be producing things really, really fast. On the one hand, it could look like your output has gone off the chart, but it would be a little bit like hiring like a coach load of junior developers and just telling them to code 24/7 without any oversight, without any guidelines, without any principles. Just say, right, here you go, just go coding. You're not really going to know what you're going to get. Even if you get something that looks like it's going to work at the end of it, you're going to be building like a tech debt bomb, which at some point is going to go off. You'd be right at that bottom right-hand corner of the chart. Like it would be dangerous for a business, even if on day one it looked like it was going to work. And so this is where I think there's a shift in terms of a role, in terms of a software engineering role. The software estate across a lot of businesses is going to grow larger and quicker than it ever has done previously. Look backwards at the last 10 years for a moment and just recall the rate at which companies like added things to their IT estate because it became so easy to buy different like SaaS subscriptions, and then they even integrate those SaaS subscriptions. Like the amount of different software companies used, it accelerated really quickly. Now look forwards, say for the next 10 years, like you guys will already be seeing this in the news. You'll already be seeing talk of people like generating their own CRMs, vibe coding it, etc., etc. Like there is going to be a lot more software getting created. The software estate is going to get big really, really quickly. Someone, not something, is going to have to be accountable for that estate. and making sure it's high quality and maintainable and adding value. Like there's another key thing, like actually did you build the right things? So that's a little bit of a shift. Like more software is going to get created. Someone's got to make sure it's the right software and it all still sits together nicely. I'm just keeping an eye on the time because I realize I'm a little bit behind schedule. So let me move forward. Right. One of the other changes, I think, for software development is that AI gives non-tech business people an advantage over software developers. Well, let me qualify that. At the moment, it feels like that. I don't think it has to be the way, but it feels like that at the moment. Now, the reason for this, they know what the business does. They know what needs to be built. And now they can just go to some like vibe coding tool, whatever it might be, and they can build stuff. Now, what this the diagram is trying to show you is that that is enabling a non-tech person from the business to do things which previously would have been the domain of software engineers. And at the moment, the focus over the last year, couple of years, has been, or there's been a large focus in terms of AI coding tools, which has allowed the non-tech people to expand what they can do and start building things for themselves. Now, that causes a little bit of a problem because for software engineers in the group, if you focus solely on coding, it means things are shrinking because other people can take things from the coding domain. What I'm trying to get at in this chart is it doesn't work one way. Like this set of tools that allows non-tech people to reach into coding, it facilitates something in the other direction as well. Those of us that are from a coding and a tech background, these tools allow us to reach into other areas of the business. They also allow us to get a really good grasp of what a business does, how it operates, what the opportunities are, who the customers are. It enables us to reach into the user experience side of things to say, all right, well, we're going to build something, but how should we use it for this particular set of users? What set of decisions is likely to lead to the best outcome? So it actually works both ways here. The two diagrams on this page are trying to demonstrate that with AI, the little area in the middle where all three circles overlap gets bigger, but it enables more people to cover more of these different disciplines. And really, the message that I want to get across to you guys is if you start using AI to help you get exposure and to augment your knowledge of other areas of the equation, like across the business, actually, that makes you super valuable because it gives you additional context with which to build, but you're still able to leverage your mastery of software development principles to create potentially better outcomes and faster. I'm fully of the belief that if you gave a non-tech person an AI toolkit for building software and you gave someone technically skilled a set of tools for building software, you're going to get quicker, better results from the person who's got a background in building software, provided they also are able to augment themselves to add in this additional layer of context that we've been talking about. So my message there is really be curious. Like it's quite interesting. You guys have turned up for a talk today where we're talking about a lot of non-tech stuff. That's kind of exactly what I'm talking about here. Like be curious about things that are not in the world of coding, because actually it will make the process of software development even more powerful for you. All right. Next up, what do I think software engineering teams might look like in the future? Little bit like this. You see, I've got a blend here of people and the robots. They're my agents here. I think we're going to have a blend. I think the agents, they need direction. I think it's not that different to how we've always done things. You maybe have a team lead who's responsible for mentoring, delegating juniors. If we're going to start introducing agents into the team, they still need management. Someone's still got to be accountable for their outputs. Someone's still got to measure the quality of their output versus the cost of running the agent, for example. They can't do this stuff by themselves. I think also you'll notice that I've got a layer down there where you've got a blended team of people and agents. I think we think about it from a perspective of a coding agent allowing a person to do more, but also flip that around. Often I think you're going to find scenarios where the people allow the coding agents to do more. So my view is actually that you'll see these hybrid teams rather than just like human teams versus agentic teams. I think you'll see a hybrid that end up being the way forward, where you get max value. I'm sure some of this stuff you guys are already well all over, but you'll have people or agents playing different roles in that team. Same mission, but different perspectives. Sometimes that might lead to contradictory recommendations. Part of this new team setup is, well, how do we overcome that? How do we overcome it when we've got two agents that disagree? How do we overcome it when we've got an agent and a person that disagrees? They're the sorts of dynamics that we're going to have to work out. Key thing that I wanted to talk about here is classic rule of the 80-20 rule. For me, I think the sweet spot is to get to a point where you've got AI handling maybe 80% of the kind of the logic-based work, if you like, to try and leave us, the people, with 100% of our time to focus on where the magic happens, like the higher value bit, the bit that requires interactions with teams, dealing with like emotions and empathy, etc., to make sure that the delivered outputs are highest value. And then very briefly, I kind of cover my last point in terms of solvable problems. I think we're all about to find that we get very busy. Now, not everyone shares this view, but I think that as we evolve over the next couple of years to this new toolkit, it's going to be feasible to solve way more problems than previously. There will be a lot more software that gets created, like the rate of it, like software expansion, if you like, I think will accelerate. And I think we will find that obviously our teams will change or become AI augmented, but I think we will find that we're probably going to end up getting busier. We'll find that we're expected to produce more just by the world at large. I think it will be the same as many other sort of economic cycles, whereby tools come along that enable us to do more than we could do previously, and there'll be more software, there'll be agents that help create it, and we will end up producing more alongside those agents. That's my view on that one. And then I'll very lastly go to my last slide, because I am running a little bit over, which is extinction or scale. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've spoken about dinosaur businesses. We've spoken about consulting businesses like mine. We've spoken about software engineering as a discipline as well. For me, the common thread is that we are all at a little bit of a crossroads. We can either try to outrun AI, become extinct, or we can say, do you know what? We can use AI to multiply the value of what we're doing. And in doing so, we really then get to improve both the quality and our capacity to produce. And that's what's going to enable us to operate like more scalable businesses and also produce better outcomes for those who we are working with. And I think in closing, the tools that we need to transform the way that most businesses work, they already exist. Like, we don't need to wait for the emergence of new technology. It's already here. I'd say don't view them as a threat. Embrace them. Figure out how to use them to scale your own output, to scale the business's output. Choose that route rather than extinction. And that's the end of my talk. So happy to take any questions. I hope that was of interest to some of you.
I've got one, Graham, just to break the ice. You mentioned when you shared your, the graph with the blue and the red line about how, your business was changing as well. You mentioned outcomes, no? And I'm assuming that basically what you have been doing up until now, and maybe you are still doing as we are, is basically selling your time to the clients. My question is, do you envision a future in which we are gonna be paid not by how much time we're gonna spend on each client, but on how much impact we are gonna make in there? I mean that maybe we can even tie it to their profit and loss statements, and directly say, okay, your business has changed that much in terms of money and profitability, and a percentage of that is mine, independently of the time that I spent in there. Does it make sense, or
That makes perfect sense. So I was having a talk on this about a week or so ago. So my view on that is the model will have to change, because if we say actually a majority of an output is delivered, if you think about the actual code that gets produced, if you like, the majority of the output comes from an agent, like how are you going to build our time? And it's not the tokens. That's not what people are paying for, because it's everything that you put around it to make those agents able to contribute to a team. So I don't think time works for that. In terms of like the alternative, I mean, I shifted a little while ago to exactly what you've described, which is more outcome, like impact on the business. So that's been how I've worked for a little while now. And I think in this new agentic world, more and more, that would I think that would have to be the case. So yeah, I very much think that will be the case. I think one of the things that you guys will have seen, especially Matteo, is you're looking at the system of delivery for Orbiton. Like, it's not about just tasking an agent with writing some code, getting the output, and then saying it's done, because you wouldn't have any predictability over the quality and the standards that went into that, and how you would then be able to maintain it over time. You need a whole system of delivery for these AI agents. You need your own principles that they're going to follow, your own guidelines, your way of managing them, etc. Like, that doesn't fit into a time-based value equation. So that, yeah, my answer to your question is I definitely think that model will have to change. I don't think time works in this new way of delivering for clients.
Thanks. I've got another one. Can you give us some example? Yeah, can you give us some example of the Dinosaur business that you have encountered in terms of which sector, what they do? Because we are in, as you said, the knowledge sector, let's say. But I believe that you were talking about a wide, different range of businesses. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, they are everywhere. I'd say it's less about the sector. I mean, I think I found them in B2C, like retail. Found it in like medical devices, market research. Like, the sector is not a key differentiator. I think really, if most businesses that have been around like 10, 15, 20 years of a particular size, they often have these kinds of characteristics. The ones that are, I suppose, the ones that are higher growth tend to be less prone to it, because they are they've had to adapt in order to scale. But the ones that have been around a long time, very steady growth, then yeah, I think they're the ones that are more susceptible to this kind of dinosaur characteristic. But yeah, it's by no means sector specific. It does make it difficult at times to try to identify them though, because where if you go and try to find them, you just got to speak to a lot of people to find the right characteristics.
Yeah, there is one in the chat, Graham.
Okay. What is the hidden dangers of shipping fast? how much software, quality software, can we swallow? Will there be like the amount of content? So this is really interesting, actually. Like this point in there, how much software can we swallow? So the reason why I think that's a great question is the constraint is going to shift. But at the moment, or historically, we've been constrained by how much software we can create, either due to time constraints or monetary constraints. That constraint is going to go. And now the constraint is going to be what can the market actually absorb? Because if you think about it, if a client came to you and said, right, I've got a list of 200 features. Well, in the olden days, we'd have gone back to them and said, all right, well, let's prioritize those. Let's use the Moscow rating. Which ones must we do? Which ones, could we do? And which ones won't we do? In the new world, you could say, well, all right, we can get all of those done. We don't actually know which ones the customers are going to like the best. So let's just do all of them. We'll get our agents to build it, and we can push it out there as quick as you like. And at the time, the cost of development might not be the problem. But imagine you did that. Imagine you created 200 new features for a client. Well, the problem then becomes their users, they're never even going to discover those 200 features, let alone use them and let alone find them valuable. And this is part of what I was getting at when I had the slide with the overlapping circles on. Now, I think part of the evolving role will be equipping ourselves now with extra knowledge to say, okay, well, there is a list of 200, but we shouldn't do all of those things. Actually, we need to go through a process to cut that down, because otherwise we push all of them out there. Our customers, they might use 5 of them, and it could be the worst 5. But we've left it for the customer to decide that now. So I think that was I think that's a really good point. Like the question of how much, for sure, too much software will get created, because cost now is not going to stop people creating it. And the new skill will be making sure that we build the right things. So that I would say is definitely a hidden danger of shipping fast and shipping too much. I think the comment there about feedback loops is absolutely right. I think this is one of the bits at the moment which is a separator between those who are using AI really effectively and those who aren't. I think a lot of people are using it and creating good value, but without a feedback loop. So it's quite a static process. Whereas those people who've figured out how to take information either from within the business or from outside, from customers, and use that to keep things moving, that I think is quite a big differentiator. So feedback loops, I would say, massive focus for those of us who are trying to move to the upper levels of that kind of AI augmentation.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I wrote those things in the chat because my microphone was failing. I just said thank you for the answer. Just to complete what you said, I would say that to me now the problem is more about controlling it than to actually using it, because it's very chatty, and I'm talking about software engineering. But if we were talking about writing books, you nowadays could spawn like 10 agents at the same time, writing 10 different books, 200 pages each in, I don't know, in a couple of hours. But then the problem would be do we have a market for all that? And to me now the challenge is in creating the validation system. Otherwise, yeah, you have a lot of features. You may, I think there's this concept of I don't know if you also say it in English, that like enshittificating a product, which is you want to add so much to it and in the end you make it worse. I think we are in the risk of doing so now.
I think you're right. And I think this links into one of the points that we touched on earlier when we were talking about pricing some of this stuff. And when we were having that conversation, we were talking about everything that goes around the AI-based delivery, like all of the guidelines, all of the principles that you want your team of agents to follow. Because you're absolutely right that if you had a brief at the moment, but you didn't have all of that kind of proprietary orbitant IP that said how your software team is actually going to deliver software, you could spawn, like, let's say you could spawn 5 different teams, give them the brief, and you could get 5 completely different things. And actually, the skill that's going to emerge is in saying, well, it's providing the background knowledge, providing the guidelines so that with your team, all right, if you did it 5 times, it might not always be exactly the same, but the orbitant way, it will have a more predictable outcome because of the context that you provide it. And I think that is where the skill is at the moment. A lot of people, it's still really new. It's really early. There are very few, or I should say, relatively few, like engineering teams at the moment that have introduced this technology throughout their process. And what it will have is where there are bits of it working in isolation, which creates the exact risk that you've described, which is that, well, like we get something completely different. It's not going to be compliant with a particular way of working, difficult to maintain it, etc. Which is why I think that step of adding in the proprietary layer, which codifies how you want your agents to work and deliver, is so important. Otherwise, I think the results are not that consistent or predictable.
Mm-hmm. I agree, but also I think the incentive is a bit in the wrong place because I don't know, you hear in many places AI will replace you, become the AI developer in your company or in your team. So I think many people are flying solo and everyone is flying in a different direction. It's good for your own sake as a developer because you get to experiment and explore in different directions. But towards the product, toward the outcome, you should be focused, which is the outcome of your product. I think effort should be made in tuning the whole system that is closing the cycle. Otherwise, you are just moving the bottleneck from the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with like your key point in there, which is if everyone's moving in isolation, it becomes quite difficult to manage that. I think it's about figuring out how to incorporate this into a delivery system. Because as you say, otherwise the danger is that one of the obvious dangers, if it's not part of a system, you end up just creating a mess, which somewhere shifts that bottleneck. So someone might be able to produce really quickly, but then at some point that creates a headache for someone else, which is quite unmanageable. Which is why I think having it system based is going to be real key to success of this approach.
Yeah, it could be just the people just making your code reviews, having to approve them or deny them, because your output could be so chatty, and it could be like, depending on your prompt, actually it's non-deterministic. But if you, even with a prompt, it's non-deterministic. But even you don't know what that developer is doing. Maybe it's just not, if you let it go without any constrictions.
And I think
very well.
Yeah, and I think is it's really key. Like we had the slide earlier on where we had like the org chart and we had the agents and the people working alongside each other, and I think that is really relevant here because at times the agents will be more productive if people are working alongside them, guiding them as well. Like sometimes they'll have a habit of going down a path which actually isn't efficient for them, and it's beneficial for either another agent or another teammate who's not an agent but a person to be able to contribute to that. It's a little bit like pair programming from the olden days, but I think that collaborative nature is where this will have max value. I don't think it works where you just say, right, here's a brief, there's an agent, go off, and then we'll see what we get at the end of it. I think collaborative approach is going to prove to be the winning formula for it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Let's just say, I'm all right for time, guys, but you guys tell me when you've had enough. So I'm just going to take another one from the chat window here, which is, what is the Strangler figure way to introduce those ideas on a dinosaur to avoid the extinction? Any tactical plan? And what are the metrics to follow to know that the transformation is following the right path? All right, so here I think we're talking about the Strangler Pattern. So when you've got, say, a large monolith, for example, how do we start introducing some of this without a kind of a massive big bang where we have to replace the whole thing overnight? This isn't really different to the way you guys have operated previously, I don't think. To a large degree, it's still about saying, there's different views on this. My personal view is that I prefer to incrementally change things in line with that Strangler pattern. Generally, for me, that it will often involve creating some way, maybe some sort of facade in front of an old piece of software so that I can take a piece of functionality at a time and replace it with something else. Like that, to me, hasn't really changed much with this new toolkit. I think it's still about trying to manage an iterative evolution away from an old stack and towards a new one. That tend to go about it. I mean, if you've got any more specifics you want to ask on that one, feel free to. But my personal view is that it will stay similar to how you would have done it previously from an implementation perspective. In terms of metrics to follow, that's an interesting one. I don't think anyone's worked that out yet. Like if I refer back to the slide I had where it showed the team on there, one of the things that will, I think, absolutely happen is that agents will end up getting managed in a very similar way to how people get managed. They might have a different set of metrics, but their performance is going to be reviewed. Like if you think about a coding agent who's spitting out loads of code now, you're going to want to know that A, it's producing good code, B, is it doing it cost effectively, or actually is it burning tokens that are so expensive? But I haven't really seen this being done in a particularly standardized way yet. I think that's going to be yet to emerge, but I'm sure it's going to be really important to monitor the performance of these agents so that you know how well they're performing in these new teams. Well, I think that is all of the questions in chat, but if you have any others, feel free to put them in there.
Amazing. Actually, nice talk and even nicer debate. So if there aren't any more questions, well, if you have them, you can always reach Graham through LinkedIn. And thank you, Graham. Thank you, everybody that intervened and asked questions and made this debate alive. And thank you, everybody, for being here. The recording is going to be shared as soon as we have got it, and it's going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. So, yes, we have just put it there in the chat. So that's about it.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you soon, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Graham.
Bye.